Okay, welcome back to the Manggcast for August 8th, 2015. 2015, that's just crazy. Who would have thought we'd get so many numbers in our years? Anyways, Gamescom happened at some point over the last week. It happened at some point since the last Manggcast, I guess. I don't know when exactly because I wasn't there, and it's not on the level of E3 or anything like that. But I thought there would be more to discuss about Gamescom for this episode, but there really wasn't. There's not a whole lot for me to say. I guess maybe there could be, but I only focus on stuff that interests me. And so to the first article that interests me is the fact that from Tetsuya Nomura, game director of the Final Fantasy VII Remake, he says that there are going to be some dramatic changes for the remake, although they won't change the game so much that fans are left looking at something completely different. So, the question then that is on everybody's mind, of course, is what are the dramatic changes? They don't want to talk about it yet, because we don't even have a semblance of a release date about this remake. So who knows when the hell this is going to come out. If I had to just take a guess, and I had to guess a really dramatic change about the Final Fantasy VII Remake, it would be getting rid of the ATB system, the active time battle, menu-based Final Fantasy old school goodness, in lieu of the more modern Final Fantasy 13 Action Jackson, everything's real time, go 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 kind of thing. That would be dramatic change in my opinion. Because I don't know what else they would really do that would be a change that would still be dramatic. Because they're not changing the story at all. They're not going to touch that. So I don't know what else they could really do to the gameplay that would be dramatic other than that. I mean, maybe changing something with the way random battles occur, but that's such a Final Fantasy staple. I don't think they would touch that. Maybe, I don't know, the materia system I thought was alright. I like the ATB system. That's why I like old school Final Fantasies. So I wouldn't like that change personally. In fact, Final Fantasy X is probably in my top 5 Final Fantasy games. Really enjoy it. Very solid game. I mean, yeah, it's got Titus. I know, but the gameplay really solid. I enjoyed it all, and so I had gotten the kind of the PS3 version or whatever. Yeah, I think it was the PS3 version. And I played all the way through Final Fantasy X again, and it was the international version this time, so I got to do some of the cool new stuff with, like, the Dark Aeons and all that, and I was like, oh, man, this is all cool. And so finally, I kind of brought the game to a close. I finished it, and I was like, oh, yeah, I also have Final Fantasy X-2, which I've never played. So, oh, I'll pop that in, and like, oh, man, more Final Fantasy X stuff. Oh, this is going to be good. And then I find out that it's not really the same type of battling system at all. It's more akin to the kind of the real-time nonsense. And so I did like 2 battles of it, and I'm like, oh, I'm done. And it's also the reason that I bought Final Fantasy 13 release day, whatever. I played it for like an hour, and I'm like, well, I'm done with that. I've never really played Final Fantasy 12 at all. I don't want any of that. I don't know why there was this change. It's bullshit. The ATB system is what Final Fantasy was. So That change would be... I wouldn't care for it. And I don't know why they would make that change, to be perfectly honest. I think they perhaps feel that that is an old school system in a modern day world, and modern day gamers want something more akin to like God of War, something like that, something that's just action, 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 which is perhaps true, but the people that are going to buy a Final Fantasy VII Remake are people that love Final Fantasy VII. Like, that's it. I mean, Final Fantasy VII, very, very popular game. I don't know if you really, like, you're gonna get enough people buying this game. I think you're hurting yourself more than helping if you change it to this more modern system. So I don't know if, like I said, nobody knows what the change is. That would just be my speculation. I hope I'm wrong. But I don't know what else they would change. It would be really dramatic. So, we don't even have a release date, and honestly, we don't know if this game will ever even come out, to be perfectly honest. So we'll just kind of have to wait and see, I suppose. There's nothing, if it isn't broke, don't fuck it up. Alright, moving on. Blizzard actually announced something at Gamescom, which is strange, because don't they have their own conference where they announce stuff? I don't know. I don't really keep in all the loop with all that, but anyways, they announced the next World of Warcraft expansion, which is called Legion. And it's going to raise the level cap to 110, which is just funny. It's just really funny. I bet, even they gotta think it's kind of funny. I mean, okay, 100, it's like, alright, it's ridiculous, but I guess it's a nice round number, whatever. But, nope, now it's 110, it's just, oh, okay. I mean, I guess they started at 60, which is kind of a random number. They could have easily ended at 50, so numbers don't mean anything. And it's going to involve the Emerald Nightmare, a new area called the Broken Isles. Dalaran's going to be the city hub again. They also mentioned class-specific order halls and followers. A totally overhauled PvP progression system. But the only thing that really interests me, and probably the only reason that I'll actually end up getting the expansion, I don't know why, is they announced a new hero class, the Demon Hunter. And, I mean, so far the only thing Demon Hunter related, as far as I know, I guess, in Blizzard lore is in, like, Diablo 3, the Demon Hunter. So maybe it'll be something akin to that. But the last hero class that they had was the Death Knight, which was in the Wrath of the Lich King expansion, which turned out to be my favorite class of all of World of Warcraft. So, for that reason alone, I'll probably end up getting the expansion, but Blizzard also announced that wasn't like during the presentation. That was different. That was during like a statement, financial statement. That they announced that they had lost another like 1.5 million subscribers. So they're at 5.6 million right now, which is at a low for it hasn't been that low in quite some time. I mean, they were up to like 11 million or something like that at some point. Like they had a lot. They had quite a bit. So yeah, they need these expansions to keep it going, but I mean, on one hand, I wish that they would, that Titan or something would have actually come out, a WoW 2 or, not calling that, or, something like that. I wish that they would have that would kind of bring that Blizzard ingenuity back into the MMO market and really make this new, fresh thing. But on the other hand, MMOs really suck. Like, even people that are obsessed with them, I think deep down they have to admit that it's not a good thing. It shouldn't exist. It's not a good way to spend time. But on the other hand, I guess I did build up friendships during my time in WoW. I mean, I guess I had fun. I guess in the end, I don't really regret my time with WoW, but it's just like, it's a tough market now. And I think even Blizzard admits that it's a tough market. Any new MMO that comes out nowadays just really, really struggles. WildStar was supposed to be this big, huge thing from former Blizzard developers. Supposed to be what WoW, like a new WoW should be, sci-fi with the raiding content. It was all supposed to be that, and then it just kind of flopped and went nowhere. And that's kind of the case for every MMO. It's a really tough genre in today's world. So I guess the fact that they have still 5.6 million subscribers, and a lot of those are probably people that just pay every month and don't realize it, I'm sure. I highly doubt that's 5.6 million active players. And they'll bring out another expansion that'll bump it up a little bit, and they'll keep collecting money. I mean, it's definitely financially viable, I'm sure. Otherwise, they would just kind of shut it down. Or they would go free to play, I guess. They're still not free to play. They're one of very few MMOs that is not. But then on the other hand, like they can just bring out new little expansion for Hearthstone and make millions upon millions of dollars. So I don't know. I don't know if we'll ever see another MMO from Blizzard. I think we'll just keep getting expansions for the next, 10 years or so, and then maybe it'll go free to play, and that'll go on that for like 20 years, and then it might die. Probably not that long. I think we'll have moved on by then. But yeah, it's interestingly, it's relevant. This expansion news is relevant to less and less people every time. Like, when Burning Crusade was announced, that was a huge deal. Wrath of the Lich King, pretty big deal. Cataclysm, Mists of Pandaria, Warlords of Draenor, Lead. Yeah, there's a lot of them now. I guess the nice thing is, if for a new player, I don't know how many of those there are, but if you want to buy a new WoW account, you just spend like $20, you get all the expansions up to the current one, and then you have to buy the current one. So you get pretty good value, I guess, but Cataclysm fucked everything up. Anyways, okay, moving on to something more relevant. At Gamescom now, they showed off actual gameplay, proper footage of Dark Souls 3. Yes. And, this is if this was a vidcast or whatever, I would show you the footage, but unfortunately it's a podcast. You'll have to look it up on your own. But the footage starts off by showing the Dark Sign, which, if you remember from Dark Souls 1, was kind of a branding on the undead. And it was an actual item you could use to sacrifice all your current souls and go back to the last bonfire. It wasn't a huge part of the plot, but it was an element of Dark Souls 1 that I don't think was really relevant in Dark Souls 2 at all. But we see it in Dark Souls 3 right at the start of this footage. And then we get a lot of the kind of panoramic shots of the locations and different creatures and things like that, before finally getting into some actual combat footage. And what I can say about what this shows is that it seems like they put Dark Souls 1 and Bloodborne into a blender and hit puree. That's what it looks like. And it looks a lot more in both gameplay and environment, atmosphere, whatever. It looks a lot closer to Dark Souls 1 than Dark Souls 2. In fact, we even see Balder Knights during one. You're the characters fighting a Balder Knight at one point during the footage. which is very Dark Souls 1, very iconic to Dark Souls 1. There's a giant boss thing that looks like one of the skeletons in the Tomb of Giants. And the hold on, I'm scanning over the footage right now. I mean, things look a lot more like Lordran than Drangleic, personally, and I think other people have agreed. So it seems like the plot may be closer to Dark Souls 1 than Dark Souls 2. And the director of Dark Souls 1, Miyazaki, was not really a part of Dark Souls 2 at all, but he is a part of Dark Souls 3 as far as I understand. And so that might explain things. The bosses shown throughout the video are, well, they're cool. They're very cool looking. They're, again, much more reminiscent of Dark Souls 1, just in their appearance and things like that, than Dark Souls 2. And I was disappointed with Dark Souls 2 bosses quite a bit, and Bloodborne kind of fixed things a little bit, just by kind of making the weird, strange, crazy, large bosses that were really cool. And I think that's kind of Miyazaki's thing. So, yeah, I'm hyped. I'm hyped for it. The combat definitely looks quicker than Dark Souls used to be, which I think is where they kind of borrowed. They're borrowing a little bit from Bloodborne. It looks a lot more fluid and quick, very quick. Not quite as quick as Bloodborne. It's still Dark Souls, but I think this will be the closest we've gotten to Bloodborne, which is good because Bloodborne had the best combat. So, yeah, there's not really much for me to say. At this point, you're probably already looking at the footage or have already seen it. It looks good. I want to play it. I still don't think we have... I don't know if we have an exact release date, other than, I think, Q1 next year. Although, like, every Soulsborne game has come out in March. February, March. It'll probably be out in March. Expect March. Okay. And that's pretty much it for video games. Unfortunately, I guess there wasn't really that much at Gamescom, despite the name. Or at least not much that I really cared to talk about. But moving on to movies, in something that relates quite a bit to gaming. The Warner Brothers and a couple other companies put out a press release today announcing a release date of December 15, 2017 for the film adaptation of Ready Player One, being directed by Steven Spielberg. Okay, so if you don't know what that is, you're missing out. Ready Player One was a book, best-selling novel, written by Ernest Cline, and it was released in 2012, I want to say. 2011, okay. Yeah, so 2011, although it kind of it picked up steam over the years, and I only read it this year. And it's about a teenager named Wade, and he's kind of just like it's dystopian, I guess. It's a dystopian world, more or less. It's kind of a shithole. However, it's interesting because it's basically a shithole because of this virtual reality software called Oasis. And Oasis is you plug into it like how we imagine virtual reality Matrix-esque would be. And in the Oasis, it's less of a virtual reality world and more of like a virtual existence. Like there's galaxies and galaxies, and it's kind of like how No Man's Sky is, except every world has it's just massively, like each one is handcrafted and all that kind of stuff. And there's there's worlds for like every kind. Like there's a whole world devoted to like World of Warcraft. And so if you wanted to actually go and just walk around Orgrimmar or Stormwind or something like that, there's a world in Oasis where you could just go there and do it. And so basically the whole Oasis, like the whole thing, was the brainchild of one guy, James Halliday, who's kind of like a Steve Jobs-esque figure, kind of a bit of a recluse, like, you know, genius upon genius kind of guy, but also kind of insane. And so the whole book is kind of about like 80s pop culture and things like that. It's about kind of retro-esque stuff. The book takes place in like the 2040s, but James Halliday, the creator of the Oasis and all that, he was obsessed with the 80s and things like that, because he kind of grew up with that and that's what he had. And so the plot of the book is basically that when James Halliday dies, he puts out this video message to the world that he had hidden a few secret Easter eggs in the Oasis, which is, you know, massively huge. And the first people to find all the Easter eggs and solve all the kind of puzzles and riddles, they will inherit his fortune and his control of the Oasis company. Basically making them like the most powerful person on the planet, the real planet. And it's quite an allure. And so after that announcement is made, you know, millions upon millions of people are, you know, out there trying to find these Easter eggs, including this one huge corporation, which is kind of basically the antagonist of the book, because they're kind of the enemy. They want to take over the Oasis and, you know, charge for it. That's the other thing, is the Oasis is basically free. And it's part of like the whole. Anyways, you kind of have to read the book. And so Wade, the main character, is just this teenager who, his like parents are both dead. He lives just in squalor. He's got like no money. He's picked on, and but he becomes obsessed with this egg hunt. And so he's just got like, like binders and binders full of 80s knowledge, you know, and he plays retro video games nonstop, watches movies, obscure Japanese cartoons and things like that. And so the whole book is filled with all these kind of references. It's filled with references to this old stuff. Like one part of the book, he actually goes through the whole movie of War Games, and he's like Matthew Broderick's character. It's just filled with references. Very 80s. Very 80s. But the book is very good. I highly recommend it if you're interested in that at all. If you're interested in 80s culture or virtual reality, it's very good. And so, I had known they were interested in making the movie for a while, but now this is kind of the big deal. This is really probably going to happen. And I'm very glad, actually, that Steven Spielberg is directing this. And the reason for that is because he did Minority Report. And the interesting thing about Minority Report is he actually was so committed to making it kind of a realistic future that he brought in like 15 scientists and futurologists and all that, and he had them just like sit down and do like a think tank of what exactly the future will look like at this time for his movie. And so they came up with all this kind of, they came up with the augmented reality and all the cars and the billboards and the advertising and the little robotic spiders and all that, and they came up with all this shit, and he used that all for the movie. And now in the real world, we're copying or we're influenced by that film for a lot of our technology. And a lot of the times people will be like, oh, it's just like that thing in Minority Report, you know? And it's just like, it's a not unrealistic film of the future. And so I'm hoping that he'll give Ready Player One a very similar kind of treatment. Now the actual real world in Ready Player One is not shown that much, because most of the book takes place in the Oasis. But the Oasis depiction needs to be pretty spot on. because it is basically a game. And a lot of movies, shows, things like that do not give very good representations of MMOs and things like that. And that's basically what the Oasis is. It's just a gigantic, very realistic, well, not realistic, but, very detailed, involved MMO. And so, yeah, I mean, he's Steven Spielberg. I trust him. Sure, he made AI, but, yeah, it's probably going to be a pretty big movie because it's something that's at the forefront of a lot of people's imaginations right now. Virtual reality is kind of becoming a thing. Augmented reality is kind of becoming a thing. But what we all really want is something like the Oasis. We want something that we can just get immersed in and just step away from our normal lives into something that's kind of fantastical, just with the press of a button. And that's kind of the interesting thing about the book, is it's very evident that the Oasis and everybody's addiction and dependency on it is what caused the real world to just go to complete shit. To the point of where people will just... In fact, Wade, even, the main character, at one point, just blocks out all his windows with, like, black paint, and he just shuts out the entire outside world, because all he really needs is the Oasis. That's it. That's all that really matters. So it's almost like a cautionary tale, really. But yeah, very good book. Highly recommend it. Very excited about the movie. If they just made the Lies of Locke Lamora movie, that would be really good. But we can't even get the Artemis Fowl movie made, so who knows. Moving on to other movies being announced. Bad Boys 3 was announced and was given a release date of February 17th, 2017. So about a year and a half from now. Which is good. I mean, we had kind of heard that people had been wanting to make it happen. Probably especially Martin Lawrence really wanted to make it happen. And it's, Bad Boys 2 is one of the greatest action movies of all time. So I was very hoping that a Bad Boys 3 would get made. But the cherry on the top of that cake is that Bad Boys 4 was given a release date of July 3rd, 2019. It's very confident of them. Now, the thing to remember is that doesn't really mean anything. They can throw that out there, and really, regardless of what happens, nobody's really going to remember that. It's basically just a statement of, we want to make this happen. Keep in mind, the new Fantastic Four movie already had... The sequel to that has a release date. That will probably never happen. But they just say these things in almost kind of like an optimistic thing, like, oh, come see the movie because there's already a sequel that's ready to go. We want to make this all happen. You want to be involved, don't you? So... Will Smith is wrapping up work on Suicide Squad, so he's kind of got an opening-ish, and so Bad Boys 3 will hopefully fit that. Now, the big question is, will Michael Bay return to direct? Now, say what you will about Michael Bay, and a lot of people will say a lot of things about him. The man knows how to direct certain action movies. Now, yeah, the Transformers series, he kind of got out of hand. We'll all admit that. But keep in mind, this guy directed The Rock. Alright? And I don't mean the actor. I don't mean the wrestler. I mean The Rock. Nicolas Cage, Sean Connery. Incredible, incredible film. Now, yeah, he also did some stinkers and, whatever. He made Bad Boys 2, and he made The Rock. That's enough cred. That's more cred than most directors will ever hope to get. But he also did The Island, and he turned down Scarlett Johansson for having a naked scene, so he'll always kind of get shit for that. But, just Bad Boys 2, The Rock. Now, I also like Bad Boys 1, but it doesn't quite compare. So the question is, will he return to direct? I would say it's unlikely, as Transformers, the next Transformers movie is kind of in his sight lines, and he's doing the Secret Soldiers of Benghazi, and he's doing stuff like that, and so based on their release schedule, Michael Bay would probably have to choose between Transformers and Bad Boys 3. I think he'd probably pick Transformers, although he shouldn't. But yeah, it's good news all around. Yeah. I mean, it needed to happen. It needed to happen. I would like Michael Bay to return, but I guess it could be a pretty big disaster, depending on the director. But it's still, at its core, it's Will Smith and Martin Lawrence, which it's all Martin Lawrence has, damn it. Just give it to him. Give it to him. Moving on. Speaking of more movies that get announcements, Nightmare on Elm Street is apparently going to get another reboot. Yeah. Okay, so about 5 years ago, Nightmare on Elm Street got rebooted, which was kind of a big deal because it was a series that had gone on for like, I don't know, 9 movies or something like that. Something ridiculous. And it had kind of sat there for a while. Nobody had really done much with it. And so it was a big series. I mean, Nightmare on Elm Street, it's a big name. Everybody has kind of heard of it. Like, even people that don't really watch any horror movies at all have heard of Nightmare on Elm Street. And so 5 years ago, we got the reboot. 7 years before that, we had gotten Freddy vs. Jason, which wasn't really... That was just kind of a weird thing. So really, the last Nightmare on Elm Street movie before that was in 1994. It was called New Nightmare. And it was kind of meta, really. Like, it was like they... Yeah, it was set in our kind of continuity, and it was about them making... Yeah, I don't even want to explain. It was very meta. Wes Craven plays himself, is what I'm trying to say. It was weird. But it was still a Nightmare on Elm Street movie, whatever. So they remade it, and the big kind of sticking point was the fact that for all of the Nightmare on Elm Street movies, including Freddy vs. Jason, Robert Englund had played Freddy. And he was Freddy. I mean, that was it. When you play a character for that many movies, like 8 movies, you are that character. Like, you're it. That's it. And so they made the decision then, for the reboot, to not bring back Robert Englund. They instead cast Jackie Earle Haley as Freddy Krueger. And I think this was because Jackie Earle Haley was kind of... He kind of had a hot spot during that time, personally, because he was Rorschach in Watchmen, which he had this incredible performance in that, and he was really crazy, and he had done some other movies, and so they're like, okay, how about Jackie Earle Haley? Probably because of his performance in Watchmen, personally, because he had this kind of this broodingness to it that they thought would work. And so, as soon as the first trailer dropped, I think people kind of understood where this reboot was going. And where it was going was into the garbage. You see, there are three big kind of slasher series during the 80s and early 90s. There's Halloween with Michael Myers. There's Friday the 13th with, more or less Jason Voorhees, and then there's Nightmare on Elm Street. And Friday the 13th and Halloween are a bit more similar, because they both involve kind of voiceless, walking, large, menacing men that just kind of butcher generally teenagers. But Nightmare on Elm Street is the kind of oddball one, and that's why it's probably my favorite series, is because of Freddy Krueger. He's not voiceless, he talks quite a bit, and that's kind of the whole appeal, is his character. He's menacing, but he's closer to something like the Joker, you know. There's this, you know, there's this kind of insanity there, I guess. And so the original Friday the 13th was not really humorous. It had some moments that were kind of like, haha, especially if you watch it now. But the sequels, they really got into the kind of the humor of Freddy's character. Like one point where he like he's like playing Nintendo and killing kids with that, and it's just kind of ridiculous and it's kind of funny, and that's why it's good. But the reboot, I know I'm talking about this for quite a while. The reboot, no humor really whatsoever. It's the very modern kind of grim, dark horror, and it's just like, oh, you know, it's just meant to be terrifying. And Jackie Earle Haley is no Robert Englund. In fact, he's not, in my mind, he's not Freddy Krueger. He's just not. He's playing some similar character, but he's not Freddy Krueger. It just didn't work. It didn't work at all. However, it made a lot of money. Like, it really did. It was the 8th all-time highest grossing slasher film in unadjusted dollars. It's the second highest grossing Nightmare on Elm Street film in the franchise. And its budget was $35 million. It made $115 million at the box office. It did well, and yet there was no sequel. Perhaps because of the critical response. Critics were not too kind to it, and they thought maybe going into a sequel of that would just carry through and nobody would go see it. It's possible, because that's probably how I would have been. I went to see it in the theaters. I probably wouldn't have gone to see a sequel, or I couldn't have gotten my friends to go see it. Which I guess brings us back to the article I was talking about, is that they plan to make another reboot. There's really no information here about the reboot. It's very early on, and so I guess I just wanted to bring it to people's attention. I just wanted to talk about it, I guess. So the point is that the 5 year ago reboot wanted to bring it into modern standards, I guess, as far as a horror movie. Like, it was very modern in that sense. It was grim, it was dark, it was kind of edgy, and the only thing that was related to Freddy Krueger was his outfit and the fact that he used nightmares to kill teenagers. That was basically it. But if they really want to capture the appeal of the Nightmare on Elm Street series, you need to bring the kind of Joker-esque personality into Freddy Krueger. The fact that, you know, unlike Michael Myers, unlike Freddy Voorhees, he does talk, and he's not really a part of our dimension. You know, he doesn't obey the same rules, and so he can kind of have that bit more insanity and a bit more playfulness to his killings, I guess. Like, Michael Myers doesn't really faff about at all when he kills people. They just get murdered. Whereas Freddy Krueger, he toys with his victims a bit more, and there's that kind of that element to it. And so I think they really need to work on that. I don't know if they'll ever bring back Robert Englund at this point. I think he's perhaps a bit too old. I don't think he would even return. and they're not really like Wes Craven is just not going to be involved, like, because he's almost 80 at this point, so I doubt he's going to be involved. So they're really just kind of working off a new book, but they need to look at the old book. They need to look at the old book. Yeah, it's... I don't think it was really Jackie Earle Haley's fault that he was a shitty Freddy Krueger. I think it was just the way they wrote it, the way they portrayed it, like, it was just too edgy and grimdark. The movies need to have a bit more soul than that. So we'll see. I mean, if I was in charge, that's what I would do, but I'm not in charge of these things, so what the hell do I know? Okay, moving on. Moving on to another movie that perhaps nobody wants made. Dungeons and Dragons is going to get another film. And, yeah. Okay. I guess it's in Warner Brothers' hands. And the last the last theatric Dungeons and Dragons movie we got was in 2000, 15 years ago. And it was kind of a disaster. It cost $45 million to make, made about $33 million at the global box office, which is that's not what you want to hear. And it was directed by Courtney Solomon. Who's Courtney Solomon, do you ask? You probably don't ask, but I'm going to tell you, because I like to say these things. Courtney Solomon has directed 3 films in his career. First movie was Dungeons and Dragons. So he didn't set the bar too high. The second movie was 5 years later, and it was An American Haunting. Which, to be honest, I'm not even sure if I've seen. I think if I have seen it, it was so utterly forgettable that I've wiped it from my mind. But I don't think I've seen it, which is surprising for me to not see a big horror movie with Donald Sutherland, no less. But critically, it was not. It's got like a 12%. Then it was about 8 years later, he directed his third movie. Since then, he produced a whole bunch of movies, including Bullet to the Head. But he decided to get back in the directing chair 8 years later. He's like, I'm gonna take another whack at this. I'm gonna see how I do. You know what the movie he directed is? You've either looked it up by now or not. The movie was called Getaway, starring Ethan Hawke and Selena Gomez. Yeah. We all know how I feel about that movie. Anyway, so the original Dungeons and Dragons. Okay, so what? Okay. Well, that's really what we're comparing here. We're comparing the 2000 Dungeons and Dragons movies to the prospect of a new Dungeons and Dragons movie. Okay, so the 2001, it gets a lot of hate. It really does. And I myself actually enjoy it quite a bit. I recognize how freaking corny and stupid and ridiculous it is. I do. But I love Jeremy Irons. And I saw it. I mean, I was 10 years old when it came out. I was 10 years old. So it's just one of those things where when you're young, you don't really know better. You just kind of watch stuff, and if it's cool when you're a kid, you just continue to think it's cool. And I don't really know if I think it's cool, but I'll still watch it any day of the week. I like it. I mean, it's got Marlon Wayans in it, and he plays a character named Snails. Like, it's just, I don't know. Okay. But it gets a lot of hate. And I think there was at least one sequel, maybe 2, that were like straight to DVD or something like that. Nobody talks about them because nobody's seen them. And that's where the Dungeons & Dragons movie license sat for a long time. Until now, I guess. And here's why a Dungeons & Dragons movie will probably never really work. Because there's two ways to go at it. There's two ways. The first way is much like how the 2000 movie went, where you use the name Dungeons & Dragons, but you really don't attach it to any product. You know? You don't attach it at all to what most people use Dungeons & Dragons for, which is a tabletop role-playing game. The Dungeons & Dragons 2000 movie, it has nothing to do with playing Dungeons & Dragons at all. What the movie is it's basically just a standard fantasy film with dragons, and there's like one dungeon, I guess two technically, and it has a thief, and what you technically could consider a warrior, and it has wizards, mages, I guess. It has mages and thieves, and so it's a fantasy film, and it has a lot of tropes and things like that could probably be attributed to the Dungeons and Dragons role-playing game, but it offers no simulated cinematic experience of playing Dungeons and Dragons. Okay, it's just a fantasy film. I think there's even a beholder in there, but they don't call it that. And so, yeah, it's a fantasy film. And as a fantasy film, it's not very good. As a Dungeons and Dragons movie, it's really not very good. I still like it, though. So that's one way to go at it. And the reason that doesn't really work is because fantasy movies have a really tough time, especially nowadays. Because of Lord of the Rings. Like, Lord of the Rings sets the gold standard now for fantasy films. Which is why The Hobbit didn't do too well. Like, it's really damn tough to make an exciting, interesting, original movie about dragons and going through dungeons with, burly men carrying axes and thieves that like to steal things. You know, it's so cliche, probably thanks to Dungeons & Dragons, the role-playing game, and things like it, that it's tough to turn that into an entertaining original movie without parodying it and, just making it a comedy and things like that, which no. And so, it's a very difficult process. I don't even know how I would make a very entertaining, especially based on the Dungeons & Dragons license. Like, if you're going to make an original thing, an original fantasy movie nowadays, that's maybe possible. If you introduce some genre-bending concepts and things that break the stereotypes and stuff like that. Okay, maybe. But with Dungeons & Dragons, you kind of have to go along with the stereotypes and with the cliches. People are expecting all that because it's Dungeons & Dragons. Okay, so that's the one way to go about it. The other way is to embrace the concept that it is based on a role-playing game. And so you're embracing kind of the public perception of the name Dungeons & Dragons. When most people think of Dungeons & Dragons, they think about a bunch of nerds sitting around in a basement, rolling dice and talking in nerdy voices. That's what people think. Well, not all people, but a bunch of people. There's still a very negative perception to the words Dungeons & Dragons. I don't know why, but I guess people would rather play Kim Kardashian's iOS game than even think about playing Dungeons & Dragons. But think about that concept. People sitting around playing, rolling dice, and role-playing, but put it into a movie. Now, most of the times, you'll get basically a comedy. You'll get something akin to the Community episode of Dungeons & Dragons, which a lot of people did like, and I saw that episode, and it's not really a perfect representation of what it's like to play, but, they're not going to just film people playing Dungeons & Dragons for half an hour, or whatever. It's much closer to than a lot of representations of Dungeons & Dragons. You have kind of shit going wrong for certain characters. You have, the dice rolls that happen where it's just like you really need a high roll, but you get a 1, or you crit at the right moment. It's just those kind of moments. That's what Dungeons and Dragons is generally about. So how do you work that into a film? I read one comment, that might have been on Reddit or something like that, where somebody said the suggestion of you split it. You actually take both of these ways and you put them into one movie. So you have the fantasy movie. You have it with the warriors and the thieves, and you have, the big burly actors. Like you put The Rock in there and Vin Diesel, or you put the really good-looking, action heroes kind of into the fantasy movie. And you show that sometimes, but then you also cut back to just, not regular actors, but the less action hero actors like Seth Rogen and Jonah Hill and things like that. You put them into just like a table. You just put them at a table in a house. I think there's an episode of Freaks and Geeks or something like that where James Franco played Dungeons and Dragons, something like that. So something akin to that. And you have them play the D&D campaign that is currently going on in the other half of the movie. And so you have, like, Jonah Hill, who's controlling The Rock's character, and so you kind of show what it's like to play D&D and how they're role-playing it, but then you also get to see the footage, I guess, of what these characters are really doing when they're role-playing. And so you're bordering, of course, then on comedy, but that's kind of the point, because D&D, generally... I've never played in a super serious campaign. Most of the times when you're playing D&D, there's a lot of laughter going on because there's a lot of just dumb, crazy shit. D&D is a very funny experience most of the time. And so they need to show that. This movie, if really done right, could change a lot of perceptions about Dungeons and Dragons. It really could, which is what Wizards of the Coast really needs. If they changed public perception of Dungeons and Dragons to something that was entertaining and funny and cool, that could be really big. I don't know if that would ever happen, but it could, I guess. And so you have, I think an example that was kind of joked about was like, if you've seen The Other Guys, which had Will Ferrell and Mark Wahlberg. But The Rock was in that with Samuel L. Jackson. And there's a part in that movie, and I guess I'm spoiling it. There's a part in that movie where, like, The Rock and Sam Jackson are basically, like, action cop heroes. Kind of what I'm talking about. And they're up on the top of a building. They're just, like, action, they're the best cops ever. They're, like, the Max Payne of cops. And they're in like pursuit of something like that, and they're like, all right, aim for the bushes. They're about to jump off this building. It's like, oh, it's gonna be so cool. And they just jump off the building and they just like land on the concrete and they die. And it's so hilarious because it's so unexpected. Putting something like that in this movie, where you have The Rock like standing there, he's about to do something, like he says like, oh, I'm gonna do this, he's gonna do something so badass, and then you cut to the D&D table part, and like Jonah Hill or whatever rolls like a 1 on his D20, and then you just get to see The Rock completely fucking up something. Like, that's what D&D is. That at its core, that's really what it is. It's the highs and lows and the entertainment that goes along with it. And so I think that would probably be, if I was going to write a D&D movie, that would be the direction I would go in. Is really not completely just simulating sitting there at a table and playing, because that would be boring, but showing what it's like to sit there and play, along with what the mental image of what you're doing, but actually, show it in a film. That would be the way I would go. I think that would be pretty cool. I don't know if that'll ever happen, because especially because of the 2000 movie, it's a tough license to work with, I think. It's tough to get normal people really interested in a D&D movie. But I think if they went with an idea like that, the trailer kind of rocked it, pun intended, It just might work. The little movie that could. Alright, and finally, because I like to always talk about something really weird and stupid, Envision Media Arts, which, I don't know, I guess it's a media company, have confirmed that they've made an exclusive agreement with Pez Candy Inc. to develop a new movie that will be based on the candy and their famed dispensers. Yes, I'm not shitting you yet again. They want to make a movie about Pez. Like, honestly, what do you even... What do you even make a movie? What would it be about? It's like, okay, you can take any object and just make it a movie like the Lego movie, but the Lego movie's already been done, and it was like it really worked. It fit, and there it is. But anything else, it's just like a Pez dispenser. Like, what? I mean, you gotta... I feel like the licensing... Well, I don't know. That's actually a good question. Because Pez, I guess, has to get all the license, the rights to use characters and people's faces and things like that for their dispensers. I mean, I have to assume. Makes sense, right? That doesn't automatically get them the rights to use those characters and faces in a movie, right? Just because they have the right to put, like, Bugs Bunny at the top of a Pez dispenser doesn't mean they can put Bugs Bunny Pez dispenser in a movie, or does it? Because they already like, it's not Bugs Bunny, it's the Bugs Bunny Pez dispenser. Like, I don't know. If I'm probably completely wrong, I think you need to get the rights for the movie. That has to be really expensive then. Like, you're not gonna get a lot of the really big. You're not gonna get probably Bugs Bunny or anything like that. So what do you really have then? You're just gonna get like the Burt Reynolds Pez dispenser or something? That's the movie. I don't know. This is dumb. This is just, it's really dumb. It's not even close to a good idea. There's so many good ideas out there. This isn't even in the top 1,000. Like, why would you think that this would make money? Nobody even cares about Pez anymore. Like, it's not good candy, and it's just like, okay, there's this little thing, and there's Mickey Mouse's head on it. Great. It's just terrible. It's just really terrible. Like, this wants to get made, but we still don't have an Artemis Fowl movie. Like, it just blows my mind. Oh, man. Alright, finally, last little thing is I'd like to talk about Mission Impossible Rogue Nation, or Mission Impossible 5, which I went to see this week. So, critic reception has been very high for this movie, if anybody has looked. I think it's in the 90s or something like that. 93%. And it's been making a good amount of money, and audiences have liked it, and it's all just been very good. And so I went and saw it, and I too really enjoyed it. I really did. Now keep in mind, and I'm a little embarrassed of this, and I'm going to try and rectify this at some point, but the only Mission Impossible movies I've seen have been 4 and 5. I've only seen this one and the last one. And it's just kind of one of those things, like, it just kind of passes you by. Like, the first Mission Impossible movie came out in 1996. I was 6 years old. Like, I wasn't about to watch Mission Impossible. The second one came out in 2000. And, I mean, I was watching Dungeons & Dragons. I wasn't watching Mission Impossible. And I was 10 years old. I still wasn't really old enough to watch Mission Impossible, I guess. It would have just gone over my head. Dungeons & Dragons, I understood. It was the snails guy, he was funny. And the dwarf. It was great. And then the third one came out in 2006. And at that point, it was like, well, I haven't seen any of the others, and whatever, I'll just pass it by. But then finally Ghost Protocol, I guess, it was kind of updated, and it had Jeremy Renner and Simon Pegg was in it, and I was kind of like, oh, let's go see this in the theater, and it was really good, and it was great. And so then, of course, now I'm kind of into the series. So I'll have to go back at some point. Okay. So the thing that I really liked about Rogue Nation is it's intelligent. It's a different type of action movie compared to something like John Wick. I mean, John Wick, one of the best action movies of recent years, or Dredd, something like Dredd, which was I could watch Dredd on repeat like 5 times in a row. Like, love that movie. But it's very different than something like that. It's not really about the kind of visceral action. There's action in the movie. There absolutely is. There's car chases and explosions, and there's guns involved and things like that. But there's a certain intelligence to it based around the kind of plot points. And based around Tom Cruise's character, Ethan Hunt. Like, when you watch John Wick, or something like that, like, Keanu Reeves' character in that movie, he's a smart guy, but the thing that he is more than anything else is he's deadly. Like, he can put down a room of guys, and you believe it. It's just, holy shit. With Tom Cruise's character, especially in this movie, I'll have to go back and watch others. Ethan Hunt, he does these spectacular stunts and things like that, but I believe that his character is intelligent. And he has especially it's helped a lot by the supporting cast. And it's kind of this thing, and again, I haven't watched the other ones. I've only watched the last 2. Where it's just kind of the other characters really look up to him as the kind of as the leader, but also the kind of the mastermind, I guess, the thinker. I mean, Simon Pegg's character is kind of the hacker guy, but it's Tom Cruise's character that comes up with all the plans. And in a lot of ways, it really reminded me of like an RPG campaign. Because you get to see, you don't really get to see the kind of planning. You just kind of get to see the final result. And so you get the general idea of what they want to accomplish, but you don't get to see them discussing the plan and doing all that. You just get to see the final chase scene, and you hope everything works out, and then, oh man, that was so clever, like, oh, clutch, it's just, so there's a certain intelligence to it that I really appreciated. And I don't want to spoil too much about it, because I want people to go see it. But there's a part, basically, where they need to, like, shit has hit the fan, they're in a really bad spot, they're kind of rogue, as the title somewhat suggests. And there's a part where basically Ethan Hunt just tells the others that what they need to do is kind of like abduct the Prime Minister of Britain. It's a small spoiler, but don't worry about it. And like, Jeremy Renner's character is he's very against this, but Ethan Hunt's just like, I can't think, I don't know his exact quotes, but I can't think of another way. And I really kind of appreciated that, because it reminded me of playing D&D, which is really, it's a weird connection, I know. But it's just like, when I'm sitting there and I'm just thinking of a plan to get out of a situation, I can appreciate something like that, where it's just like, it's something utterly ridiculous. The group doesn't really like it, but it's just like, I can't think of something else. And so I really appreciated something like that. I know it's the weirdest connection, but there's just, trust me, there's a certain intelligence to the movie. So other than that, the fact that it's kind of a smart action movie, the action itself, very good. Special effects are all good. I do like the supporting cast. It's all good. Jeremy Renner is not a leading man, but he's a good supporting man. Simon Pegg is always great. Ving Rhames is in it, apparently, which is, I guess because he was in all the other Mission Impossibles. If he wasn't, he would never be anywhere close to this movie. Like, he would have, like, a restraining order This movie would have a restraining order on Ving Rhames if he wasn't in the earlier ones. It's basically how it worked. Alec Baldwin plays kind of a tertiary character. The villain's kind of weird, to be honest. It's played by Sean Harris, who, I mean, he was in Prometheus, but mostly just does kind of a lot of British stuff. Yeah, he was kind of a cock, I guess, but it worked out. Very good movie, and yeah, so I recommend it. I do. I guess if you really don't like action movies just entirely, then no, you're never going to like it, because there is a lot of action elements to it that are somewhat realistic. I mean, Ethan Hunt is the mastermind of the team, but he's also like the action Jackson can do anything kind of character. Yeah, it's ridiculous, but it's entertaining. Because some of the plans that they actually go through with are just utterly ridiculous, but the situations that they're put in, again, it's something that I can really appreciate. The trailers kind of all spoil it. The part where he like jumps into the water tunnel or whatever like that. Like that whole segment, they're trying to steal like this little chip, but the security for that whole thing is just so ridiculous, and it's just really cool and intelligent the way that they solve this situation. It's something that I can appreciate, but I think like even my parents, which don't like a lot of action movies or anything like that, they enjoyed it quite a bit, and they even recognize that it's kind of a smart action movie compared to something like The Equalizer, or, John Wick, or The Raid, or something like that. So it's different. It's obviously very Hollywood and all that kind of stuff, but I liked it. All right, so I guess that is going to wrap up today's show. We went on long enough. I thought Gamescom was going to be a bigger deal. Maybe it was, and I just completely missed out on some important news articles. But I do my own research. I got nobody else to help me. I'm going to try one of these times to get my good buddy Ziggy along as a guest to talk about some subjects, because he also enjoys movies and or video games. I mean, hopefully one day this keeps on going enough and I maybe get to be a guest on some other podcasts. That would be cool, but I think I actually have to I have to go out there and network, and I don't think I'd ever do that. But anyways, my name is Mang. This has been the Manggcast for August 8th, 2015. I'll see you fine folks next week.